LiberalViewer present.
So, welcome to LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I picked out 24 of the weekend's best clips for what should be a really interesting show for you all tonight. As usual, my clips come mostly from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the big five corporate outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, the so-called corporate media here in the United States. And as usual, I'll also have some political comedy clips for you, a few from HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher from last Friday night, and also one from Amy Schumer's appearance on last night's Saturday Night Live. As for this week's topics, you can see all three of the main topics I'm covering listed and described down in the video description. And if you're watching the recorded version of the show, you should see time indexes down there so you can skip to the next topic if what you're watching is starting to bore you, I guess. Also, again, this week, whether you're watching the show live or as a recorded show, I've put a link down in the video description to my public Patreon page where you can download the clip list in order of the 24 clips I'm using. Sometimes I hold up this piece of paper and you can see the titles of the clip files are also this sort of cryptic notes that I take for myself, and sometimes, like I said, you see me looking at those, and if you want to look at the clip list, then you can try to decode those little summary notes for yourself. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. As for the order of the topics this week, I'll start with the Republican side of the 2016 presidential campaign, but for another week it won't overwhelm the show. There are only 5 clips on the Republican side, including 1 clip each from Dr. Ben Carson, Donald Trump, and Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal, all saying ridiculous things about guns. Then I'll have, I think it's 8 clips on the surprising breakdown of the Republican leadership in the House of Representatives, where the Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy withdrew his bid for Speaker of the House, and he threw the whole process into kind of a turmoil that's still going on. And finally, at the end, I'll show 11 clips on the Democratic side of the 2016 presidential race, with several clips addressing the completed negotiations on the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And for the Bernie Sanders fans, I have a couple good Bernie Sanders clips this week. And because I'm starting with the Republican presidential race, though, and all the clips of the Republican candidates I have this morning show them saying those ridiculous things about guns, I thought I'd start with the best segment from last night's Saturday Night Live, except maybe the opening monologue from Amy Schumer, which wasn't really political, but this pre-produced parody ad definitely was political and also featured Amy Schumer, as you can see in this clip.
There are things we all share. Love. Family. Connection.
Hey.
A sense of purpose. And also, guns.
You like it? You do?
Guns are there. In little moments. And big ones.
So it goes on from there, and if you watch the whole thing, including the beginning and end parts that I cut out, if you want to watch the whole thing, you can see a link down in the video description to the whole video available on Saturday Night Live's YouTube channel, so just free on YouTube. And I really liked it, like I said. I think it was the best thing on Saturday Night Live outside of Amy Schumer's monologue, maybe. It didn't directly attack gun laws or politicians' positions on guns, but it was more sort of an overall attack on American gun culture, I guess, and that definitely deserves criticism. But of course, you won't hear any of that criticism from the comments on guns, I promise, from Dr. Ben Carson, Donald Trump, and Governor Bobby Jindal. But before I get to those, I want to show the latest CBS poll showing why you should care, at least about what Donald Trump and Ben Carson think, because they are the leaders in this national poll of Republicans, followed disturbingly by Senator Ted Cruz in third place, as you can see John Dickerson explain on Face the Nation over here.
We've got a brand new CBS News poll. Donald Trump is in first place in the Republican field with 27%. That's the same as last month. Ben Carson is running second at 21%. Ted Cruz comes in next at 9%, followed by Marco Rubio at 8%. Jeb Bush and Carly Fiorina are both at 6%, with the remaining candidates coming in at less than 5% support among Republican primary voters.
So Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal, who I'll show third in the next three clips, is actually just a statistical asterisk in that poll. I don't think they even showed him, but Donald Trump and Ben Carson are the front runners, so I guess we have to take them seriously, even though Ben Carson's comments about guns either demonstrate or violate Godwin's law about bringing up Nazis, depending on the version of Godwin's law you follow, and Dr. Carson doesn't back down, despite several follow-up questions from John Dickerson on Face the Nation over in this clip.
You made in which you said the likelihood of Hitler being able to accomplish his goals would have been greatly diminished if the people had been armed. I want to talk about the context of that statement. In your book, there's a passage in which you say confiscating the guns of American citizens would violate the Constitution, as well as rendering the citizenry vulnerable to criminals and tyrants. So I want to ask you, who wants to confiscate all the guns of the American citizens?
Well, what I'm talking about is the reason that we have a Second Amendment in there. You know, this is a book about the Constitution, and the Second Amendment is part of it. And it's there for the reasons that I stated in the book. Specifically, in case of an invasion by a foreign power, the people will be able to aid the military. And also, if we have a time when we have the wrong people in office and they want to dominate the people will be able to defend themselves. As Daniel Webster eloquently said, the people of America will never suffer under tyranny because they are armed.
In the book, it suggests, though, that there is, and I just want to make sure I read this right, when you talk about confiscating the guns of American citizens, do you think that's a present threat, the notion that guns would be confiscated from American citizens?
No, it is something, many of the things that are in the Constitution are to help to prevent horrible things from happening. So they're in place to make sure that the people maintain their liberties and that the government remains constrained. Those are the two purposes.
I think a quote that speaks to what you're talking about also in your book, you say that you were once a supporter of a ban on assault weapons and armor-piercing bullets, but then, as you say in your book, you recognized the intent of the Second Amendment, which is to protect the freedom of the people from an overly aggressive government. It sounds like you're saying that the idea of an overly aggressive government that would require that kind of a resistance is a clear and present danger. Do you see it that way?
I didn't say that it was going on right now. I think the implication is quite clear that it is something that can happen. And I listed a number of countries where that kind of thing happened. The fact of the matter is, if you go to those countries well before it happened, and you had asked the people if that's going to happen in their country, they would say, oh, no, it wouldn't happen here.
Yeah, that's what interests me, because so many people are distrustful of the government, they're angry at the government, and you've mentioned some countries, but this is also the context in which you said the people in Germany didn't speak up when Nazism was on the rise. And I guess what I wonder is, do you think it's that close here, or is that just hyperbole, to use the Nazi analogies?
It's not hyperbole at all. Whether it's on our doorstep or whether it's 50 years away, it's still a concern, and it's something that we must guard against. That's one of the real purposes of having a constitution. I think the founders were really quite insightful into looking at possibilities and understanding what has happened in other places and trying to put together something that would prevent that from happening here. You know, there are a lot of people in the media who will take anything you say and try to make it into hyperbole and try to make it into controversy. But the fact of the matter is, when you talk to average American citizens, they know exactly what I'm talking about.
But the extermination of an entire race, which was the Nazi goal, that's a pretty big thing to compare our current situation to. I guess that's what has people a little confused.
You do not want to get there.
Now, I think that argument, which I've heard from a lot of people, not just Dr. Ben Carson, that we need our guns to protect us from a tyrannical government, It's kind of a silly argument. In fact, I put a link down in the video description to a playlist I have of several videos on guns, the Second Amendment, and mass shootings. And I think there's one in there, take my rights, not my gun, take my guns, or take my rights, not my guns, or something like that. Talks about how it's the people who rely on guns to protect their rights don't understand the massive amount of firepower that the government has compared to what even the most insane group of individuals can imagine. I was thinking of like what happened in Waco with David Koresh, for those people who can remember way back then. And anyway, I didn't want to go into a long discussion about the gun issue and about whether guns can protect us from the government, but I think most people will agree that comparing the United States to Nazi Germany, or even that we're on the verge of Nazi Germany and we need our guns to protect us from our Nazi government, I don't know. I have a lot of problems with the violations of civil liberties by both the Obama administration and the Bush administration, but I can still tell the difference between both those administrations and Nazi Germany. I hope Dr. Ben Carson can. And now I want to move on to the actual Republican front runner. This is the only clip of Donald Trump I'm using, and it's less than a minute long. It's not, that last clip of Ben Carson was, almost 4 minutes. This is Donald Trump talking about how he has a concealed weapons permit, also talking to John Dickerson on Face the Nation, who raises his concealed weapons permit with him, and he says he actually still carries a gun, and he actually tries to make that Republican argument you hear a lot, that the solution to all these mass shootings is more guns. We need more guns, as Donald Trump explains over here.
You have a concealed weapons permit.
Yes,
When did you get it?
years ago,
Why?
because I like to have myself protected.
Do you carry on a...
Sometimes.
Would you advise, in the context of current gun violence, would you advise people to get that?
Well, I'm a big Second Amendment person, big, as you probably know. In fact, I'm coming out with a book in another 3 or 4 weeks called Crippled America. Tough words, Crippled America. I talk a lot about the Second Amendment in the book. Had they had, as an example, for the horrible thing that just took place, okay, horrible, in Oregon, had somebody in that room had a gun, the result would have been better.
So should people get armed the way you are?
That's up to them, but I will tell you, I feel much better being armed.
What about teachers?
I think that if you had the teacher, assuming they knew how to use the weapon, which hopefully they would, you would have been a lot better when this maniac walked into class starting to shoot people.
I just don't think it works that way. I don't think more guns make us safer. You can let me know down in the comment section if you disagree. But after hearing Donald Trump argue that the solution to the gun problem is more guns, and he carries a concealed weapon sometimes, and then hearing Dr. Ben Carson argue that we need our guns to protect us from the encroaching fascism of our U.S. government, I want to move on to another kind of ridiculous argument. This is, I guess, in some ways more hyperbolic because it's coming from a guy who basically doesn't register 1% in that last poll, from what I understand. And so he's trying to get attention. This is Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal not backing down from his comments on that shooter in Oregon. You know, I think I showed a clip of the father of the shooter coming out and being in favor of more gun control. And so Louisiana Governor Bobby Jindal basically blamed the shooter's father for the shooting and doesn't back down. And after saying nasty things about this guy who just lost his son, even though his son was the perpetrator, not the victim. In some ways, they're all kind of victims, especially if it's like a case of mental illness. And anyway, here's Bobby Jindal making that argument to Martha Raddatz on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos this morning here.
I want to turn quickly, if we could, to domestic issues. You got in some hot water earlier this week about the shooting in Roseburg, Oregon, for essentially blaming the shooter's father, writing, "This killer's father is now lecturing us on the need for gun control. He is not and he has not been in his son's life. He's a complete failure as a father. He should be embarrassed to even show his face in public. He's the problem here." You really believe he's responsible for this mass shooting?
Martha, I absolutely believe he has no right to be lecturing the rest of us. Look, gun control is not going to solve this.
But
let's
do
be honest,
you really know enough about that family to blame that father?
Martha, let me finish. We've got a moral decay going on in our culture. We've got graphic violence in our movies, our video games, our TV shows. We've got senseless violence being depicted in our songs. We've got a culture that doesn't value life. We've got millions of boys growing up without father figures, without that guidance at home. Too often these shooters are misguided young men, and so you've got Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, and now this shooter's father lecturing us on the need for gun control. He doesn't need to be lecturing us. He, by his own admission, didn't know how his son got those guns, didn't know how many guns his son had. By his own admission, wasn't involved in his son's life, hadn't been communicating with him since he was living with his mother. He doesn't need to be lecturing us on gun control. We need to fix our culture. We need a renaissance of decency. We need a spiritual revival in this country. Passing more laws to take away the rights of law-abiding Americans won't solve this problem, won't stop the next massacre, won't stop the next tragedy.
Okay, thank you very much.
So, I don't know. I mean, as I've talked about, and I think is even on my YouTube channel page self-description, I'm a stay-at-home dad, or less and less these days, but I definitely committed a lot of time to fatherhood, and despite that large commitment on my part, I wouldn't presume to judge some other person, whether they fulfilled their duties as a father, and certainly whether they're to blame for their child turning out to be, at the age of 26 as an adult, turning out to be this mass shooter. That doesn't seem like you can blame that on the parent without a lot more evidence than Bobby Jindal apparently has. But anyway, I thought that was just as ridiculous as what Ben Carson and Donald Trump said. You can let me know which one you think was the most ridiculous of all the Republican candidates. Those are like I said, the only 3 candidate clips from the Republicans this week. There wasn't a lot of focus on the Republican race, I think, because the next topic, so I'm going to move on to that now. The next topic is the weird controversy or weird chaos in the House of Representatives, with no one being the Speaker of the House, or, well, John Boehner is technically still Speaker of the House, but he said he was going to resign, and then the Majority Leader, Kevin McCarthy, said he was going to take over, and then in the middle of the week, it turned out Kevin McCarthy didn't have the votes. He had enough votes to win the Republican caucus. There are, 247, 248, I can't remember, Republicans in the House of Representatives, but out of the 435 total numbers in the House of Representatives, that means that McCarthy can win the Republican caucus with what's half of 247? Is it like 120? Well, whatever, you do the math. And he can win the Republican caucus easily because there's only like 40 people in this Freedom Caucus. But then he can't get the 218 votes he needs to win on the floor of the House. He needs Democrats to become Speaker of the House, and so he withdrew his name. And I'm going to show some news on that in a minute. But first, I want to show how Bill Maher kind of made fun of the whole process and made fun of Kevin McCarthy, and then made fun of the person who looks like the most likely replacement if he agrees to take the job, Representative Paul Ryan. I'll talk about that a little more if you watch that clip over here.
But this is totally uncharted waters that we were in. I mean, no wonder the Republicans are going nuts. They're like, if we don't put a strong leader in place soon, there is a very real risk of Congress getting something done. So now, they are trying to convince Paul Ryan. Remember Paul Ryan? Mitt Romney's vice presidential candidate. Right. They're trying to convince him to do it, and they think he might be able to bridge the divide. He's not exactly a Tea Party guy, but he can communicate with them in a way a domesticated dog can talk to wolves. But Paul Ryan doesn't want it either. So most of the party is now just working endlessly, tirelessly to find a way to get Paul Ryan to change his no to a yes. They're this close to bringing in Bill Cosby. We joke. Oh, we make little jokes. So Paul Ryan said, the pressure is so great, he couldn't anymore just say no, no, no. He said, I'm going to be praying on it. Oh, for fuck's sake. We're not asking you to make a burnt offering of your second child. We're giving you the corner office, you dummy. So the early word is that he went home to pray on it, and God got back to him and said, don't drag me into this.
So that's Bill Maher's kind of coverage of the news about the Speaker of the House in a comical way, and I thought several of those jokes were kind of funny, and I wanted to share that segment of the monologue with you all, and now I want to share with you the way it was seriously reported on a couple of the corporate news outlets. I'm going to show you first the ABC report from Jonathan Karl on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, and then how Chuck Todd reported on it over on Meet the Press. But first, here's the ABC report on the chaos in the House of Representatives and kind of the facts behind the jokes you just heard from Bill Maher about how Paul Ryan seems to be the most likely candidate if he'll accept the job over in this clip.
Tails.
After that stunning decision by House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy to bow out of the race for Speaker,
I think I shocked some of you, huh?
Republicans are now looking for someone, anyone, to lead them.
Why would anyone want to be Speaker at this point?
That is the $64,000 question.
Many in the GOP are practically begging Congressman Paul Ryan to take the job.
I did everything except carry his gym bag this morning, trying to get him to do it.
The man who would be king insists he doesn't want the crown, but Republicans hope he will have a change of heart. And one Ryan confidant tells ABC News that seems to be happening. He puts the odds of Ryan running for Speaker at 60%. But for a party known for taking who's next in line, this week's Capitol chaos proves just how much the outsiders have taken over. It's a clash that's been building for years, those ushered into power by the Tea Party wave taking on the entrenched Washington establishment.
Well, in 2010, the American people showed up in enormous numbers, and we got a Republican majority in the House. And very little changed.
Now a Republican Party that gained huge majorities in 2014 is in disarray, as real deadlines loom over funding the government and raising the debt limit. Republicans still have their largest House majority since Herbert Hoover was president. But what good is it when they're so divided?
We can't go on like this, where one small group is allowed to hijack the entire House. We have to have a government that works. This is not a debating society.
Congress has been turned upside down by the same forces that are upending the race for the White House. With political experience now a liability, outsiders Donald Trump and Dr. Ben Carson are dominating the 2016 field, no matter what they say or who they offend. On the campaign trail and in the Capitol, the establishment is on shaky ground, a house of cards trying to avoid collapse. For This Week, Jonathan Karl, ABC News, Washington.
So like I said, that's the ABC report on the chaos in the House of Representatives and in the Republican Party and how it kind of mirrors the anti-establishment fervor amongst the 2016 presidential candidates. And you'll see when now I'm going to show you a very similar report from NBC's Meet the Press. Chuck Todd introduces it here and makes a lot of the same points in the same kind of analysis, talking about how it shows the weakness of the establishment. It mirrors the presidential race. Also that Paul Ryan looks like the most likely person who can take over as Speaker of the House, although it seems unclear as to whether he'll be willing to take the job. But I'll talk about that a little more after you watch that report from Meet the Press this morning here.
On the Republican side, the revolt by conservative House members has thrown the party, at least in Congress, into disarray. Having already defeated Majority Leader Eric Cantor and forced out Speaker Boehner, they claimed their third victim this week when Kevin McCarthy was forced out of the race for Speaker.
I think I shocked some of you, huh?
A Republican fight between conservatives and the establishment that's been brewing for a generation exploded again, and this week it took another casualty.
Clearly, the establishment lost today.
Quite the fall from grace for this establishment. It was just 5 years ago that these three men led the Republicans back into power, and now, one by one, they've been pushed out. It started in June of last year.
Look, obviously, we came up short. My, oh my, what a wonderful day.
This will be a best footstep for... Yeah, I messed up.
Two of the fallen were self-described young guns. The third, Congressman Paul Ryan, is being aggressively drafted to do the job of Speaker, even by his competition.
If Paul Ryan got into the race, of course I'd support him.
Right now, I'm just going to catch my flight so I can make it home for dinner.
As Ryan rises, so too is ire rising among some skeptical conservatives, with one calling Ryan a, quote, dangerous pick. Another, radio host Laura Ingraham, tweeted Friday, are they talking about the same Paul Ryan who once lost a VP debate to Joe Biden?
Some of my conservative colleagues remember Paul Ryan's impassioned pleas for the TARP, the Wall Street bailout. I would want to talk to Paul Ryan about why he kicked conservatives off the Budget Committee.
For decades, Republicans picked the guy who was, quote, next in line to be the party standard bearer. Now the conservative anger that propelled the party to victory in 2010 is reshaping it. With their largest majority in the House since the 1920s, Republicans are still struggling to govern themselves. 72% of Republican voters say they're dissatisfied with their own leaders in Congress.
Liberal light, they get elected saying one thing, and then they get there and don't follow through on promises.
Too many people that go down there and drink the water. They become addicted to whatever.
When you get to that point of the establishment, Republican or Democrat, there's very little difference.
And on the 2016 campaign trail, the grassroots has so far rejected Republicans with deep political resumes, preferring self-declared outsiders. After McCarthy's fall, those outsiders rushed to declare victory.
The city of Washington is in utter panic.
They're giving me a lot of credit for that because I said you really need somebody very, very tough and very smart.
Hoping to become the leader of a Republican Party, still searching for one.
I guess I promised no more Donald Trump clips, and there was a little one in that last report from Chuck Todd on NBC's Meet the Press about the chaos over the lack of a successor to John Boehner as Speaker of the House amongst the Republicans. So I apologize. I know some people are very Trump averse, but he is the front runner and he does creep into some of these reports. And so anyway, I showed both the ABC and NBC report, and they came to some similar conclusions about the anti-establishment Republican wave and how it's mirrored in this fight over who should be Speaker of the House and the Republican candidates for president in 2016. And it's basically the power of the Tea Party and this Freedom Caucus. And the next way I want to show that this was covered on the Sunday morning news programs, I'm going to show with two clips, one from Meet the Press again, and then the other one's from CNN State of the Union, where what they did is they brought on an establishment Republican to argue with a Tea Party Republican about who should be the next speaker or what should govern who's going to be the next speaker, because you'll see the Tea Party people are saying that they like Paul Ryan, but if he's going to be the next Speaker of the House, he has to commit to this decentralization of power, which basically gives up the last little bit of power that the leadership has in the House of Representatives, which I'll discuss after you see the first clip. This is a more heated debate between the guy who beat Eric Cantor, who used to be the majority leader. This was like the first sign that the Tea Party was very angry with the Republican leadership. You remember Eric Cantor, who was majority leader in the House of Representatives, was defeated by this guy. I don't even remember his name, but it's David Bratt. He was the Tea Party guy on Meet the Press, and he was arguing with Tom Cole, who is in the Republican leadership, so he's the establishment guy, and they actually had kind of a heated, almost angry debate. I only took one clip from it, but you can see all of Meet the Press through the link I put down in the video description. Here's how they see what's supposed to happen in the leadership, and I'll discuss it a little more if you watch it here.
Two different things here from each side of your argument. With you, Congressman Bratt, at the end of the day, the conservative movement's not a majority. You don't necessarily even have a governing majority inside the House. So if you don't have that, how do you, when do you say, okay, I'm getting 50% of what I want, and it's the best I can do now, I go to the campaign trail so I can go elect a Republican president?
Totally disagree with the premise. We do have a majority. Last week on the CR, we had 153 Republicans vote against leadership's budget. That's the 153. The press is the only people that talks about this 40 guys, all the press today in the Washington Post is this chaos. The only chaos up here is on K Street, and the Democrats are freaking out because if we actually have to balance a budget, right, even Keynes, a liberal economist, knew you had to run surpluses in the good years so you can pay for the deficits in the bad years. We've had 7 years in a row of $500 billion deficits. It's terrible.
Let me, Congressman Dent, one of I think Congressman Brad and other people's complaints, and these are, over half of the Republican conference has been elected in the last 6 years. Yeah. And their complaint is this. You know what? We get here and we don't have an opportunity to actually vote on the change, vote on some of the issues that we would like. Leadership tells us what we can or can't do. We don't get that opportunity to lose, essentially. Maybe we will lose. Maybe leadership's right, but you don't give us the opportunity to do it. What do you say to him on that?
Well, I think the leadership has been, frankly, very accommodating to those members, who don't vote for the bills at the end of the process. This happens routinely, and I think a number of us have had enough of it. David just mentioned 150 Republicans voted against the continuing resolution. I can tell you that over half the Republican caucus strongly supported the continuing resolution. Only 91 voted for it. Why? Why? Because, again, we're back to hope yes, vote no. They'd rather let the 91 of us take the flak, and they can go home and tell folks that they stood strong. This is a bill, by the way, that just level funded the government for 2.5 months. That's all it did.
All right, I'm going
to... So there are a lot of issues in that argument there. The last thing he was talking about there is whether there's a majority who support the Tea Party. Only 91 people voted for the continuing resolution, but once that was going to lose, it meant that a lot of Republicans who might have supported it, who hoped it would win, like he was saying, were free to vote against it because it was going to lose anyway, and then they didn't have to worry about a primary, because a lot of Republicans, a lot of members of the House of Representatives, because of the gerrymandered districts, meaning that the districts they change the shape of the district so that it's a safe Republican or safe Democratic district for, incumbents almost always win, or the same party almost always wins in the districts. So all the representatives have to worry about is someone like the Republicans have to worry about being primaried from their right by some Tea Party guy. So they have to worry a lot more about being as far right as possible than coming to some compromise to please the people who put them into office. And then the thing that the Tea Party Republican was asking for, that the leadership can no longer have as much control over who gets on what committee, that's one of the last powers that the leadership has to control people and punish them if they don't follow the party line and vote the way the leadership wants. They've already gotten rid of earmarks. The Republicans pretty much don't have earmarks, so they can't say, I'll funnel money into these projects in your district to get you to, follow the party line. And of course, the changes of campaign finance have also meant that the parties don't give money to candidates as much as they used to. Now they have their own independent ways of raising money, and also by, affiliating themselves with the Tea Party, they can send out these ridiculous partisan emails that actually get them money from ridiculous partisan people, I guess. But that was the argument that I wanted to sort of talk about the issues from over on Meet the Press. Over on CNN's State of the Union, they had a similar, much more civil, less impassioned argument between an establishment Republican and a Tea Party Republican. In this case, the Tea Party Republican was Raul Labrador, and then the establishment Republican is Tom Cole. It was Charlie Dent. I said it was Tom Cole over on Meet the Press. I guess I mixed up the two clips because it was Charlie Dent on Meet the Press and now Tom Cole over on CNN State of the Union. And I want to show you the discussion between the establishment and the Tea Party over who should be Speaker of the House between these two Republicans on State of the Union this morning here.
Congressman Labrador and his colleagues in the caucus, Freedom Caucus, they've been very openly frustrated, even had a lot of animosity towards your friends in the leadership. John Boehner is a very good friend of yours, so is Kevin McCarthy. Do you think that their points and their sort of concern is valid?
Yeah, I do. Look, I think there's a lot of concern about the rules, and I think we're always willing to relook at those, and we should. I actually think this process, as chaotic as it looks from the outside, and as difficult as it's been for some individuals, it's probably been a pretty healthy one. Right now,
you think that the chaos is healthy?
Yeah, I actually do, because I think a lot of things are being aired that probably needed to be aired. I'm proud of the Speaker for the actions he took. He saw the need for new leadership. I'm proud of Kevin McCarthy to say I'm not the one. We'll work it out. In the meantime, look, John Boehner remains Speaker while the process goes underway. And if my friend Paul Ryan decides to run, I think ultimately he'll win. But if not, it's not like we're going to be without a Speaker. I mean, the longer this goes on, the longer John Boehner's tenure lasts, which is something he doesn't want. But, that's just the irony of it.
But it's more than just about this moment, about this Speaker. It's about the larger discussion about the Republican Party. I've heard others say to me, Congressman Labrador, that they're concerned about what this could mean for the Republican chances in 2016, that it just looks like Republicans are in so much disarray that it could hurt your chances. And to get all the things you want, whether repealing Obamacare or defunding Planned Parenthood, you're going to need a Republican in the White House.
Well, and that's the key. That's what we want as well. We want to make sure that we're together as a conference, because we should be fighting the Democrats, not the Republicans. We shouldn't be fighting each other. Tom and I get along really well. We disagree very many times, but we get along really well. We're friends. I think I'm friends with many of the people on the other side, but we need to get to a point that we figure out how we make the House work, how we allow every member to participate, how we allow the process to work. And we have to make sure that we understand that there are a lot of other people who could also bring the conference together. All the focus is on Paul. I don't know if he wants to do the job, but we have other people in the conference that I think could actually bring the conference together, because they have the process. That's why we supported Daniel Webster. What people don't understand is that we had a candidate in the race who was actually closer to us philosophically, Jason Chaffetz, who is also a friend of mine. But we went with the guy who wants to go for the process. He's actually, his conservative voting record is much different than mine. But he ran the House of Representatives and the Senate in Florida in a way that brought people together. I think Paul could do it. I think Rob Bishop. I don't know if you agree. Somebody like Rob Bishop would be great. He was also Speaker of the House in Utah. There's people like that can help us come together as a conference.
Well, it's nice to see you guys getting along so well now, and hopefully that your factions will get along.
Our disagreements tend to be tactical, not theological. We actually believe in the same thing.
But tactics do matter. Thank
you,
Congressman Labrador, Congressman Cole.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for joining.
So in that second clip with Representative Raul Labrador and Representative Tom Cole, there was a much more civil exchange between the establishment and the Tea Party than in the previous clip on NBC's Meet the Press from Representative Charlie Dent representing the establishment, and then Representative Bratt, what's his first name? I can never remember that guy's name for some reason. David Bratt, the guy who won the primary against Eric Cantor back in, 2014 Republican takeover of the Senate, and that was what happened in the general election, but in the primary before the Republicans took over the Senate in the general election, this Tea Party candidate, David Bratt, took the Virginia seat from the majority leader in the House of Representatives, the Republican Eric Cantor. And that's basically what the Republicans fear the most, I think, because they don't really have to worry about beating the Democrat in a lot of these gerrymandered districts. They just have to worry about defeating someone on their right in a primary, which is, David Bratt ended up defeating Eric Cantor, so he is the poster boy for that phenomenon. So having shown those two clips, one from CNN, one from NBC, that were a back and forth between the establishment and the Tea Party, the last three clips I want to show on the topic of the Speaker of the House chaos is just Tea Party people. First, Jason Chaffetz. Remember, last Sunday I showed a clip of him from Fox News Sunday where he threw his name into the Speaker's race, and who knows, he still may end up being Speaker if Paul Ryan doesn't take the job. But I want to show a clip of him over on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos this time, talking to Martha Raddatz, where she quoted a whole bunch of different journalists describing what was happening in the House of Representatives as chaos and a banana republic. And then my favorite one was a reference to Game of Thrones, which I guess is more like that first establishment versus Tea Party fight on Meet the Press and less like the one on CNN. But anyway, here's how Jason Chaffetz responded to the claim that the Republicans are playing a Game of Thrones in this clip.
You've heard the descriptions of what happened this week. Total confusion, a banana republic, turmoil, crisis in the party. Chris Christie comparing this to Game of Thrones. And the Washington Post Karen Tumulty writing this. Less than a year after a sweeping electoral triumph, Republicans are on the verge of ceasing to function as a national political party. Mr. Chairman, how do you think Americans should see this?
Well, that was a little dramatic. Look, we have passed out of the House roughly 200 bills that are sitting over in the United States Senate. A lot of our frustration is with the Senate. It's with the president. But we got to change things. We need a fresh start. We have a gulf and a divide that needs to be bridged. We need a speaker, I think, who takes the communications realm and drives the discussion in this country about what it is we're standing for and what it is we're trying to do. And so we're going through that exercise because Speaker Boehner stepped down and the majority leader decided that we do need a fresh face. And that's in part why I put my name in for the spot.
So, like I said, that's Jason Chaffetz, from a representative Republican from Utah, who I talked about a little on the show last week. I've never really been a fan of since I made a video showing him several years back making a vaguely racist comment about Kobe Bryant being ignorant when, Kobe Bryant actually is a fairly smart guy. He speaks Italian, among other things, which is relevant to that comment. I didn't actually put a link down to that video in the video description for the live show, but maybe I'll put it down there for the recorded show so you can see the Jason Chaffetz comment about Kobe Bryant I covered several years back in an edited, produced video. But I want to end the topic of the Speaker of the House chaos with two clips from Fox News Sunday. They actually had on the chair of the Freedom Caucus, which is the 40 Republicans, depending on how you count, who are against the leadership, who are making it impossible for Kevin McCarthy to get 218 votes on the floor when the Speaker of the House vote comes to, because that's something that the entire House of Representatives has to vote on. It's actually in the Constitution. It's Article 1, Section 2, I think. I haven't looked, but I'm pretty sure it's Article 1, Section 2 says that the House of Representatives selects a speaker, so that means the whole House votes on it. So even if he can win a majority of Republicans, he can't get there are 247 or 248, I can't remember, Republicans in the House of Representatives. But if 40 of them won't vote for John Boehner or Kevin McCarthy, that means that's only 208 votes if you subtract the 40 from 248, right? So that means they need Democrats to get to the 218 they need for a majority of the total votes in the House of Representatives, which is 435 if you're trying to do the math on your own along the way. So here's the head of those 40 Republicans who are making it impossible for the person who wins the most Republican votes to get the majority of votes in the House of Representatives without Democratic help. His name is Representative Jim Jordan. He was on Fox News Sunday, and here you can see him saying that he might support Paul Ryan if he accepts these principles that gets rid of like the last bit of power that the leadership has to bring people into line, which I'll discuss after you watch that here.
Focused on. So, and to just kind of simplify it, one of the things you're talking about is control over who gets on what committee, also control over what bills come to the floor and what amendments come up. A lot of it is decentralization of power. Are you saying that Paul Ryan would have to agree to that before you would support him?
I think the next speaker has to be committed to that. I think Paul would be.
I know Daniel Webster is, but here's a great example. The steering committee, most of your viewers never heard of. They decide who's on what committees, who chairs the committees. They have all the power, and they also dish out the punishment. Great example is Tim Hulskamp, congressman from Kansas, place where they have a little bit of agriculture, was kicked off the agriculture committee because he wouldn't do exactly what those top people in our House told him to do. And here's the interesting thing, kicked off the agriculture committee, and he's got a PhD in agriculture policy. That's the kind of stuff that has to stop, because when you have that kind of environment, I would argue it's not conducive to producing the results that we told the voters we were going to do when they gave us the chance to serve them.
But if Paul Ryan won't agree to, and we're going to talk to Newt Gingrich in a moment, that really considerable decentralization of power in the House, will you and the other members of your caucus support him?
I think he will agree to that. I think the next speaker has to agree to that, because this place has got to change. The American people, 60% of our voters, Chris, think we have betrayed them. Not disappointed, not slightly off track. We've betrayed them. We need a shakeup, and now this is exactly what the people are demanding. So I think the next speaker will want to make those kind of changes. Think about that steering committee again for a second. On the steering committee, the speaker gets to vote 5 times. So if Chris Wallace is a member of Congress and he's on the steering committee, you would get 1 vote, but the speaker gets to vote 5 times. Now, where in the world does that kind of format work? We never see that anywhere else. So that's the kind of stuff that has to change.
Congressman.
So, like I said, that's Chris Wallace and this head of the Freedom Caucus, the Tea Party Republicans, arguing about whether the leadership should have the power to decide who's on what committee, which is one of the last powers they even have to try to get their members to follow what the leadership wants them to do on these votes. And the last clip I want to show on this topic is also from Representative Jim Jordan, responding to a fairly good confrontational point, I thought, from Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday, but I think Fox News is more on the side of the establishment than the Tea Party, but I'm not quite sure about that. I guess it depends on who on Fox News you're talking about, and they do have some diversity of views between Tea Party Republicans and establishment Republicans on Fox News. Never say they're not fair and balanced. I think they do have some fairness and balance between those two sides of the debate. And so here's Chris Wallace challenging Representative Jim Jordan on the fact that, you know, he only has 40 votes, so that's not enough to win. You have to compromise, and you can hear Jim Jordan's response to that here.
Here's the problem, Congressman. Republican establishment types call your group the Hell No Caucus or the Suicide Caucus, and they say you're more interested in ideological warfare than you are in governing.
No.
Well, if I may, let me just finish the question. Sure. The fact is, you keep talking about the obstacles or the tests you're going to put up for any potential speaker. You're just 40 members of a 247-member Republican caucus. At some point, don't you and your members have to bow to the will of the majority of Republicans?
Of course we're willing to compromise, but what we need in the House, I think the American people are demanding, what our voters are demanding is, let's not forfeit to the White House before the ref blows the whistle. Let's not forfeit before the game starts. Let's establish our position, come together, compromise, figure out where 247 Republicans, what we can agree on, and then let's go stand for that position. Let's articulate that. Let's have the debate in a compelling way and take the case to the White House, take the case to the United States Senate. That's what our voters expect. It seems all too often, though, we say, oh, the president's demanding this, we have to give in before the game even starts. That's what the next speaker has to do. That's what we want to see in our next speaker, and that's what we're pushing for. Of course we understand we have to compromise, but when we compromise and come up with a position, let's go fight for it.
Finally.
So, yeah, that is the world that Tea Party Republicans live in, the world in which the problem is that Republicans have compromised too much with President Obama. They've given in too much. They haven't blocked his agenda enough. That's the problem. Everyone who has paid attention to what's been going on in the Congress for the last 6.5 years, there's been, except for the first couple years when President Obama had a Democratic Senate and a Democratic House. Even then, there were these filibusters and there were these conservative Democrats who would side with the Republicans sometimes, and so they had to get health care through at that time with the most conservative Democrats and the most bought out by the insurance companies. That's why Obamacare is such like a weird system that gives so much subsidy to insurance companies, because it was the only way to get 60 votes in the Senate. And it's ridiculous to think that what the Republicans have done since they took over the House and more than 41 seats in the Senate, they've basically blocked President Obama in every way. The number of filibusters in the Senate, the way the House of Representatives has worked, it's just delusional for the Tea Party to think that they have not been blocking President Obama enough, and at least that's my opinion as a liberal viewer, I guess, that tells you where I come from in analyzing what's been happening. But if you look at the growth of the use of the filibuster under Republicans in the Senate when they were in the minority, and then what the House of Representatives has done in terms of shutting down the government before a couple years back, and it may come to that again before the end of this year. Anyway, that's the last clip I want to show on that topic. So the final topic for tonight, and I believe I have 11 clips on the Democratic side of the presidential race because there are a few different subtopics. There's going to be some time I spend on the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and on there's a Martin O'Malley clip. There are 2 Bernie Sanders clips. But I want to start with a couple, or with one overview of what's been going on the Democratic side. This is ABC reporter Cecilia Vega, who is camped outside Vice President Biden's house with a bunch of other media, which tells you the state of the race on the Biden part of it. And apparently you'll see in this report that she says he has about a week or so before he starts getting too far into the year to actually make the Georgia primary, and various other deadlines will pass, and he doesn't really have time to put together a campaign if he doesn't announce in the next week or so. Of course, the Democratic debate, the first one, is coming up this Tuesday, just in a couple days, so he could announce that day and join the debate, although that doesn't seem likely apparently. But I'll talk about all of that a little more after you watch that report from Cecilia Vega on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos this morning in this clip.
Martha, good morning to you. No sign of him yet, but all eyes on Joe Biden. If he's going to jump into this race, he needs to decide soon. Joe Biden on the run. This weekend, sprinting past cameras, following his every move and dodging questions about entering the race for the White House.
Get out of my way, will you?
The vice president at home in Delaware with his family, weighing his political future. Sources close to Biden tell ABC News he believes he has about 1 week to make up his mind. And while publicly last week it was funny man Joe.
If I don't move, I'll be demoted to Secretary of State or something like that. That's a joke. That's a joke.
Privately, his aides had very serious discussions with Democratic Party leaders, covering critical rules and fast-approaching ballot deadlines, all crucial if a team is mounting a presidential bid. If he does jump in, a new poll shows Biden cutting into Hillary Clinton's lead. In the key battleground states, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Florida, Clinton now wins more than 50% of the primary vote, far ahead of Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. But watch that lead dip if Biden declares. And with a possible Biden run looming, Clinton issuing a warning.
Now, if he gets into the election, then people are going to be raising questions, just like they do about me. That's what happens when you get into the arena.
In that arena, a stunning political reversal. Clinton denouncing one of President Obama's top priorities, a flip-flop on his Trans-Pacific Partnership, the 12-nation trade deal she once backed and called the gold standard. But now?
I am not in favor of what I have learned about it.
In less than a month, it is her 4th major split from her former boss. From her opposition to the Keystone Pipeline to calling for a no-fly zone in Syria and saying the administration has gone too far on deportations. With Sanders gaining, Clinton moving to the left before Tuesday's first Democratic debate as he rakes in the campaign cash and draws enormous crowds. More than 13,000 in Arizona Friday and 9,000 in Colorado Saturday. And just in time for the debate, Republicans releasing this new ad targeting Hillary Clinton.
I did not email any classified material to anyone.
A federal government watchdog has determined there was classified information.
Did in fact contain classified information.
Okay, and Cecilia joins us now live. Cecilia, you've talked about Joe Biden probably deciding this week, but when would it actually be too late for him to decide?
Well, you know, technically he could run as a write-in candidate and declare at the very last minute, but no one believes that that's actually going to happen. It is late already. Time is of the essence right now, and there are real deadlines approaching. The first one coming up in just a few days, October 29th. He would need to declare by then in order to make it onto the Georgia ballot. But it's not just these deadlines. He's got to compete with campaign infrastructure that are built up already out there with major cash that's been raised. Those polls that we talked about in our piece that show him making a dent in Hillary Clinton's lead if he does decide to declare. It's not just that. Take a look at this. She has 64,000 campaign volunteers built up all around this country already. If he wants to compete with that, Martha, he's got to decide soon. Some would say it's already too late.
Well,
So I don't know, maybe it is already too late, but it's getting very late for Vice President Joe Biden to enter the race. I never really thought it was more than a 50-50, but I'm just judging based on all these clips that I've shown all of you if you've been watching over the last several weeks and what's going to happen. You know, I don't have any inside knowledge, or you can let me know what you think down in the comment section if Joe Biden's going to get in the race. One thing that's clear from all the polling is that if he got in the race, he wouldn't replace Hillary Clinton as front runner, and he wouldn't even change Bernie Sanders to the front runner, at least if you look at the national CBS poll, although you might come to a different conclusion from the Iowa and New Hampshire polls that I'm going to show from NBC after that. But first, here's the national poll. It's the second half of what I showed for the Republicans, and it is with Biden in the race, and without Biden in the race, Hillary is still the front runner in this clip.
Among Democratic contenders, Hillary Clinton remains ahead of Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders by a wide margin. If you include Vice President Joe Biden, who has not announced his plans yet, Clinton still has a considerable lead. The rest of the Democratic field comes in at 2% or less in either scenario.
So there are going to be a bunch of people on the stage who really have no chance according to the current polls, but it's still early. You know, Jim Webb and Lincoln Chafee and Martin O'Malley, who I'm going to show a clip from in just a few minutes. I'm a little disappointed that Professor Lawrence Lessig isn't going to be at the debate. I guess he wasn't in enough polls or didn't register, or I don't know exactly why he is less worthy than those other three. Bernie Sanders obviously has quite a following, and Hillary Clinton is the front runner, and Joe Biden, if he got in the race, apparently would get like 20%. But the more interesting poll is the next one from NBC, shown on Meet the Press. Chuck Todd introduces it here, and it shows that you could almost call Bernie Sanders the front runner if you're looking at Iowa and New Hampshire after a theoretical entry by Vice President Joe Biden, because you'll see Bernie Sanders is even farther ahead in New Hampshire and almost even in Iowa, so maybe the front runner, I don't know. Here's that polling from NBC in this clip.
The issue this morning is this: what would a Biden run do to the Hillary Clinton-Bernie Sanders matchup? Let's start in Iowa. As you see here, this is our latest NBC News Wall Street Journal Marist poll. We have Hillary Clinton in a two-way race, up 11 points. Well, what happens when it's a three-way race? Well, we did that. And you see here, Joe Biden, he starts in third place, sitting at 22. Look what happens to Hillary Clinton's double-digit lead. It goes to single digits, 33-28. So clearly, Joe Biden pulls a lot more from Clinton than he does Sanders. Guess what? Same story in New Hampshire. Of course, in our New Hampshire poll, we actually had Sanders ahead even in the two-way race, 48-39, almost a double-digit lead. Watch what happens when you toss in Biden. He takes more from Hillary Clinton. Biden's in third, 18. But look at this. Hillary Clinton loses double-digit support, and Bernie Sanders loses 5 or 6 points. But guess what? His overall lead gets to double digits. So what does this all mean? We know a couple of things. Number one, Joe Biden clearly hurts Hillary Clinton both in votes, not just the mere talk of his candidacy. But number two, if Biden gets in, could we now say that the actual front runner for the Democratic nomination is then Bernie Sanders? It's clear the Sanders supporters are willing to stick with Sanders more so than Clinton supporters. Up next.
And he's about to say, up next, Bernie Sanders. And as I promised, there will be some Bernie Sanders clips. But that's kind of interesting to see one of the corporate news programs consider the possibility of Democratic socialist Bernie Sanders as the front runner. They every time they refer to him over on Fox News, they always mention him as a socialist, and that'll be an issue that I'll be covering in the second Bernie Sanders clip I'm going to show. But before I get to the Bernie Sanders clip, I want to show a little bit more about the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the big news that Hillary Clinton came out against it, even though she made a lot of very positive comments about this Trans-Pacific Partnership, which I'll discuss a little more after you watch that clip from, let me just make sure I have the right clip here. Yeah, this is from NBC's Meet the Press also, where they talked about how it was a flip-flop, pretty clearly a flip-flop on Hillary Clinton's part in this clip.
Hillary Clinton is facing a much stiffer challenge from Bernie Sanders than she expected when this campaign started. But it would be fair to say she's not helping herself with her growing list of, shall we say, policy adjustments when it comes to the progressive movement. Same-sex marriage, tough prison sentencing, the Keystone Pipeline, and of course her latest, her decision to come out against that big Asian trade deal.
What I know about it as of today, I am not in favor of what I have learned about it. I don't have the text. We don't yet have all the details. I don't believe it's going to meet the high bar I have set.
The problem, to borrow a recent political cliche, she was for it before she was against it, and really for it. As CNN calculated a few months ago, Clinton pushed and praised the TPP trade deal on at least 45 separate occasions. In fact, in her book, Hard Choices, just published last year, she said this: the TPP became the signature economic pillar of our strategy in Asia. We're going to get to...
So, yeah, it's definitely a flip-flop on Hillary Clinton's part, but at least for most people on the left, she's coming to the right decision. I came out against fast-track authority for the Trans-Pacific Partnership because I thought that it was skewed towards corporate interests and against workers. And then also there are these copyright issues. That was one of the things I noticed. I haven't had a chance to read it all, and that, I'm kind of nerdy that way, that I will probably eventually try to read all the publicly available parts, having gone to law school and all that stuff. I feel capable of reading through those type of documents, even though they can be a little bit mind-numbing, and there's a lot of skimming that goes on. I won't deny that, but I don't think I can deny that there was skimming that went on every now and then in law school. I think skimming is a skill you pick up. So to figure out what parts, you don't really have to look at that carefully. But there's a lot of stuff put in there by corporate interests, and there's a lot of stuff on copyright. I saw this analysis from the Electronic Frontier Foundation that's already made me think that it's a bad deal on copyright issues. But I do want to read some more of it before I come to a final conclusion about how bad it is and how much I'm against it. But I'm already definitely leaning against TPP, and Hillary Clinton, I think, has come to the right decision, therefore, based on that clip you saw. But I also, let's see, the next clip I want to show is an argument between Andrew Sullivan, the gay conservative blogger who retired from blogging, who I used to read a lot when he was at the New Republic magazine, and he was arguing with Bill Maher on HBO's Real Time last Friday about whether it's a good or a bad thing that Hillary Clinton is a calculating politician, and they were specifically talking about her flip on the TPP, I think, over in this clip.
Anybody as smart as she is. Make the kind of dumb error that she made with the email server. I mean,
You are so in the bubble on this one. Let me ask Joe Biden.
60% of the country don't believe a word she says. Is that a bubble? That's
60% of the country believes Noah's Ark happened. That's true. The exact same number. So don't tell me that means something.
It does mean something. No one gets elected president if no one trusts you or believes a word you say for good reason.
Okay.
Do you really believe she genuinely opposes the specific trade pact? Do you really, the one she argued for, negotiated for, challenged, and this week came out against it?
If you're asking
for what
me,
reason?
if you're asking
she can't
me,
even give a good reason.
If you're asking me if she's a calculating politician, yes. Is that the most desirable thing in the world? No, but I live in the real world. I'd rather have a politician who calculates than one who can't. Quit making me mad.
The question is not whether she can calculate, is whether she's anything but calculation. Whether she has any vision, whether she has any core beliefs, or whether she's been a prison of another bubble called Washington, which tells people just because of their people that they've worked with or the establishment that they're unimpeachable, they will always be the candidate.
Andrew? Not a fan.
So I kind of agree with both sides of that argument, or there are different parts of that argument where I agreed with both sides. I mean, Bill Maher does have a point that you want a politician who's able to calculate is better than, one that isn't, if you have to have a calculating politician. But then I do have a lot of doubts about Hillary Clinton as a candidate that I've talked about, mainly in terms of being too close to Wall Street and corporate interests, which is relevant to this TPP flip, and then also being too right-wing and hawkish on foreign policy. And that's I noticed someone asked in the comment section before the show started if I was going to vote for Bernie Sanders, and as I've mentioned on the show over several weeks, I actually haven't decided who I'm going to vote for in the Democratic primary yet. I am kind of leaning towards Bernie Sanders, but I'm also kind of interested in this Professor Lawrence Lessig candidacy that maybe I'll talk about more on next Sunday's show, because Lawrence Lessig is going to be a guest on HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher next Friday, so hopefully I'll have a clip where I can talk about that again. I think I showed a clip of him a few weeks back when he announced his candidacy. I think it was on This Week with George Stephanopoulos. I could be wrong about that, but anyway, I want to move on to the next clip on the Democratic side of the race. This is also having to do with the TPP, and it's from CNN State of the Union. One of Hillary Clinton's opponents, Martin O'Malley, former mayor of Baltimore and governor of Maryland, who is supposedly a left-wing alternative to Hillary Clinton, but I think he has some problems with his record on zero tolerance and the drug war. And anyway, over on CNN State of the Union, Dana Bash asked him about Hillary Clinton's flip-flop on the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP, and he first, I thought, in kind of an arrogant way, took credit for her moving to the left when he's kind of an asterisk in the polls, and Bernie Sanders probably has a lot more to do with it. And then he explained why he thinks TPP is bad, as I'll talk about a little more after you watch that clip over here.
Hillary Clinton has shifted left on several policy issues over the past couple of weeks and months. The biggest was this past week on a pretty big trade deal that she had once called the gold standard.
She seems to be moving for and was probably an architect of.
So she does seem to be moving in your direction, though, politically. What do you think?
We're already affecting the debate. We've got them right where we want them, don't we?
What do you think this says about her and her chances and her sort of viability?
Let me tell you for my part, But I was against the Trans-Pacific Partnership 8 months ago because I believe it's bad for the country. Thomas Jefferson once said that in matters of fashion, one should swim with the current, but on matters of principle, one should stand like a rock. I believe that we need to stop stumbling backwards into these bad trade deals that offshore American jobs and American profits. We need to build up our own industries in the United States. Yes, engage in trade, but not at the expense of keeping our eye on the ball, which is more jobs here, a stronger middle class here, wages that go up rather than down. And what we saw from NAFTA was that when you do these trade deals, it opens up the floodgates, and multinational corporations chase cheap labor abroad, use these trade deals to evade environmental protections and standards for workers. That doesn't help the United States here at home. I'm opposed to it, have been for a long time. I didn't shift positions right on the eve of the first Democratic debate.
Speaking of that, very quickly.
So those are pretty good anti-TPP talking points from Martin O'Malley, and he did have sort of a negative edge, almost like a negative attack on Hillary Clinton there. And I just thought he was somewhat arrogant to take credit for Hillary Clinton's move to the left, especially given that his showing in the polls is so much less than the senator from Vermont, who I'm going to show in the next couple clips, Senator Bernie Sanders, who answers a similar question over on NBC's Meet the Press from Chuck Todd about why does it matter that he's had, Hillary Clinton's moving to all these positions that are the same as Bernie Sanders' positions. Why does it matter that Bernie Sanders has held the positions longer? And you can see this is the closest Bernie Sanders comes to negative attacks. He just draws contrasts between himself and Hillary Clinton over in this clip.
You've always been hesitant to contrast yourself with Secretary Clinton, but you make certain subtle differences by saying on some of these issues where she now agrees with you, you welcome her over and you emphasize you've had these positions for a long time. Why should that matter? Why should that matter to a voter that you've held this position for much longer, say on TPP,
Good question.
than Secretary Clinton?
Yeah, okay, I'll tell you why it should matter. And let me be very clear. I mean, I happen to respect and like Hillary Clinton, so I don't get into personal attacks, you know that. But are there differences of opinion that should be discussed? Of course there are. That's what an election is about. To answer your question, what it's about is at a time when so few have so much, and when the big money interests have so much political power, the real most important question is who is prepared to mobilize the American people to stand up to these very powerful and wealthy special interests? Whose track record for the last 25 years has been to say to Wall Street, you know what, we are going to have to break up the large financial institutions?
So this is a trust issue. You're basically saying, you know what, I've been there, so you can trust that I'll never leave that fight. With somebody else who gets there late, you think it's perhaps a trust issue?
I mean, Keystone Pipeline, all right, I believe that climate change is the great global crisis that we face, the environmental crisis. From day one, I opposed the Keystone Pipeline because I believe that if you're serious about climate change, you don't encourage the excavation and transportation of very dirty oil. That was my view from day one. TPP. I believe that our trade policies going way back when. I voted against NAFTA, CAFTA, PNTR with China. I think they have been a disaster for the American worker, allowed corporations to shut down here, move abroad. So people will have to contrast my consistency and my willingness to stand up to Wall Street and corporations, big corporations, with the Secretary.
Let's go into...
So it will be really interesting to see how that plays on Tuesday at the CNN debate, where Hillary Clinton and Senator Bernie Sanders will be on a stage together. I think that is a much more credible threat to Hillary Clinton than what you saw before from former Maryland Governor Martin O'Malley. But before I leave Senator Bernie Sanders, I want to show one more brief clip. This is not about the TPP. In this clip, you'll see he deals with the label of himself as a socialist. Apparently, according to the question from Chuck Todd, you'll see he's been shying away from being a socialist and calling himself a progressive, and he kind of denies that, and you'll see calls himself a democratic socialist and not a capitalist, which I'm not sure. I think that's the best terminology to use, as I'll discuss after you watch that clip over here.
All right. You joked about the idea when people call you a socialist, you say, yes, I'm going to make everybody wear the same color pajamas.
Especially you.
Especially me.
I have a pair of pajamas just for you.
I hear you. And then the other day I noticed you said, you know what? Don't use the word socialist. I'm gonna say I'm a progressive. No. Are you pushing back on that idea?
Not at all.
Or you embrace I'm a European socialist?
Look, when one of your Republican colleagues gets on the show, do you say, are you a capitalist? Have you ever referred to them as capitalists?
Yeah. Are you a capitalist?
No. I'm a democratic socialist. But what I mean is I've been elected as an independent throughout my political career. I am running now in the Democratic nomination process and will support, I hope to win, I expect to win. But
you'll support the Democratic nominee?
I will.
And before I let you go.
Now, I don't know about why it is that Bernie Sanders is shifting between socialism, democratic socialism, and progressive, apparently, which isn't a word that I like to use. I'm LiberalViewer. I like the word liberal, but the word socialism, as I've talked about on previous shows, actually means government or collective ownership of the means of production. That's traditional socialism. Democratic socialism, I think that's a more nebulous term, and the way I've heard Bernie Sanders talk about it in terms of a greater social safety net, free college education, single-payer health care, and progressive taxation, more taxes on the rich. That's redistribution of wealth through a progressive tax system. None of those things are actually government ownership of the means of production. Even a single-payer healthcare system, if the hospitals are privately owned and they pay doctors, unless all the hospitals are owned by the government and all the doctors are employed by the government, even single payer is not socialism. For socialism, you have to have like Amtrak, where the government owns the trains, basically, or so democratic socialism is what I think is actually mixed capitalism. It's capitalism with a robust social safety net, and I think it's not a good selling point to call it democratic socialism. I think calling it mixed capitalism is better than democratic socialism. I think it would sell better to the American people in a general election, but that's my opinion. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. I'm going to show now a clip on the same topic from CNN State of the Union. Dana Bash kind of asked Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who's the head of the Democratic Party. That's one of her jobs other than being a member of Congress from representing Florida, asked her if it would hurt the electability of Democrats to be associated with the word socialism. And you'll see she kind of dodges the question by saying all the Democratic candidates would be better than any of the Republicans because they're better for workers and better for women, and well, you'll hear over in this clip.
Somebody we know is running, Bernie Sanders. He is a self-identified socialist. If he is your party's nominee, would that socialist label hurt the Democratic Party's chances of winning the White House in 2016?
Dana, this election is going to be decided based on what the voters believe is the best choice in their candidate for president, who is going to help make sure that their lives can get better. And any one of our candidates on that stage on Tuesday night, and we're excited and looking forward to CNN putting on this debate with us, any one of those candidates is in dramatic contrast to any of the Republican circus performers that are on the other side. I mean, they're talking about equal pay for equal work and making sure that we can create more jobs and making sure that we can create a pathway for legal status and citizenship for immigrants in this country. And the Republicans are saying, let's kick more immigrants out of the country. Let's take away health care from women and from all Americans.
So, Congresswoman,
so that's the way the American people are going to make this choice.
You believe that Bernie Sanders could beat any Republican?
I believe that any one of our candidates will stand in stark contrast when it comes to the priorities of the American people and how they're going to make the decision on who they vote for president to any of the Republican candidates. The Republicans have been trying to outright wing one another. Look, between the 15 Republican candidates that are left, all of whom are trying to out-Trump Donald Trump by saying, yeah, let's kick women, let's kick immigrants out of this country. Let's take away health care from women. Let's increase taxes on the middle class to pay for tax cuts for the wealthy. Let's end Medicare as we know it. Yes, I think any of the candidates on our side of the aisle who are talking about job creation, making sure we can expand access to health care, build the cornerstones of a middle class life by helping people get a good education and having a secure retirement, any one of our candidates will be chosen and eventually elected as the 45th president of the United States of America because of that contrast.
And before I let you go,
So, like I said, Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz did kind of dodge the question by saying that any one of the Democratic candidates would stand in stark contrast to the Republican candidates on all these issues. Although one thing I kind of enjoyed in her answer that I wanted to mention is the way she referred to the Republican candidates for president as being, I think the word she said, circus performers, which I think is like a nice civil way of saying they're a bunch of clowns. That you tell me if you think that is the correct interpretation of the circus performer phrase. But before I leave the CNN coverage of the Democratic side, I want to show their like big bombshell report. I'm not going to show the entire report because it was like 7 or 8 minutes long. This is almost 5 minutes long. There's this person who used to work for the Benghazi committee investigating Hillary Clinton, or investigating Benghazi, the 4 American deaths there, supposedly. But this guy said that he was fired because he wouldn't target Hillary Clinton enough, and he's a Republican who wouldn't even vote for any of the Democratic candidates, apparently. And then he had some problems with being in the Air Force Reserve and having to take time off. And anyway, I'll talk about that a little more after you watch this almost 5-minute clip from CNN's State of the Union. This is the usual host, Jake Tapper, apparently on assignment to talk to this guy who, his name, let me make sure I pronounce it right, is Brad Podliska, talking to Jake Tapper about how it's all a partisan witch hunt, or at least a lot of it is a partisan witch hunt, apparently, over in this clip.
Terrorist attack overseas that caught the nation off guard. September 11, 2012. Militants stormed the U.S. mission in Benghazi, Libya, and a nearby CIA annex, killing 4 Americans, including Ambassador Chris Stevens.
The House of Representatives constituted this committee, and they did so for us to find all of the facts, and I intend to do that.
Republicans determined to investigate established a new House Select Committee to focus on how it all happened and what happened after. The Select Committee on Benghazi. But this man says that committee's mission has changed and is now focused solely on how to put blame on former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, which the committee's Republican chairman Trey Gowdy has repeatedly denied.
I'm scared. I'm going up against powerful people in Washington. I was fired for trying to conduct an objective, nonpartisan, thorough investigation.
Major Bradley Podliska was an investigator on the committee for almost 9 months before being fired in June. The Air Force Reserve intelligence officer is planning a lawsuit against the committee. He says he was dismissed in part because of the time commitment required by his duty as a major in the Air Force Reserves, but also, he says, for resisting pressure to focus his investigation on Hillary Clinton and her State Department.
This has become a partisan investigation. I do not know the reason for the hyper-focus on Hillary Clinton.
Podliska is a conservative Republican who even once interned for the Conservative Media Research Center.
I would just like to state that I am going to vote for the Republican nominee in 2016. I do not support Hillary Clinton for president.
He believes the Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton has much to answer for.
Republicans are going to listen to you and think, oh, this is some liberal trying to get Hillary Clinton off the hook. Liberals are going to hear you and say, oh, look, see, he's exonerating Hillary Clinton. This committee is all political and Hillary has nothing to explain. What's your message to these partisans?
I'm trying to be objective about this, and as I stated, Hillary Clinton has a lot of explaining to do. We, however, did not need to shift resources to hyper-focus on Hillary Clinton. We didn't need to de-emphasize, or in some cases drop, the investigation on different agencies, different organizations, and different individuals.
We were misled. Clinton, of course, has faced intense questioning from Congress on the State Department in Benghazi.
As I have said many times, I take responsibility.
Republicans have accused her State Department of denying requests for additional security at the U.S. mission before the attack, and for being slow to acknowledge it was a terrorist attack.
The fact is, we had 4 dead Americans. Was it because of a protest, or was it because of guys out for a walk one night who decided they'd go kill some Americans? What difference at this point does it make?
The committee has called a string of Clinton's former State Department aides to testify. Several investigations have detailed the many failures of the Obama administration in protecting Americans in Libya and in their explanations after the fact. But Democrats are now calling for the House committee to be disbanded after Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy touted the committee's role in hurting Clinton's poll numbers.
Everybody thought Hillary Clinton was unbeatable, right? But we put together a Benghazi special committee, a select committee. What are her numbers today? Her numbers are dropping.
Did he accidentally tell the truth about the committee, that in recent months its focus has been on trying to bring Hillary Clinton's poll numbers down?
Yes, I think it was a slip of the tongue. Now, as I explained earlier, his reasoning was wrong. I honestly do not believe this investigation was set up to go after Hillary. I believe it shifted that way.
Podliska says his problems began in March of this year when he told his bosses on the committee that he needed to take some time off to serve in the Air Force Reserves.
And I said, gentlemen, I am obligated to serve the Air Force Reserve for 39 days this year. My active duty supervisor wants me to report for an exercise in March for 2 weeks, so I'll be going on that exercise. And also in May, they need me to report to backfill for some people.
And what was the response of the committee staff director when you told him that you had to go honor this obligation to the Air Force Reserve?
His response was one word, and that word was wow. In lowercase, no punctuation, nothing. And honestly, I was horrified by it. I knew that he was upset.
In a statement to CNN, the House committee said it, quote, vigorously denies all of his allegations. Podliska, the committee says, quote, was terminated in part because he himself manifested improper partiality and animus in his investigative work. The committee went on to say that Podliska, quote, has continued to imagine a variety of new outlandish, never previously mentioned allegations since his departure, including that his supervisors somehow manifested an anti-military animus toward him. Podliska.
Now, like I said, it goes on for another couple minutes there. I'm not going to show the entire thing, although I believe you can see the entire State of the Union episode through a link I put. Well, actually, CNN only shows certain videos, but that exclusive CNN thing should be on the CNN website, I would think. But anyway, the thing about that, if you watch the whole thing or even that clip, I'm a little skeptical about both sides there. You know, it's almost like the argument between the Tea Party and the establishment. It's like two kind of like right-wing crazies arguing, and you don't really know which right-wing crazy to believe. And there were some things that accuser there, Brad, what's his name, Podliska, some of the things he said if you watch the whole thing, I mean, he seemed to have an agenda on Benghazi also. It was more of I think, an anti-establishment one where he wanted to go against the CIA and the Defense Department. And, I mean, there is some blame for not adequate security, and the CIA was like over in this, it wasn't actually the embassy or even the consulate, it was like this special CIA mission, and they were, who knows exactly what they were doing, and there were calls for more security, and so there were problems, but the investigation has gone on longer than Watergate and longer than like Iran-Contra, and it's just way out of hand. So I wanted to show you that, and that's probably a preview of what we're going to be seeing in the 2016 presidential election, as long as Hillary Clinton is the front runner, and maybe Bernie Sanders has a chance based on some of those previous clips. You can let me know what you think. They're going to be in this big debate on Tuesday, and then the last clip I want to show is just like 20 seconds from Bill Maher's monologue on last Friday, where he made, I don't know, he's a fairly old guy himself, Bill Maher, and he made a kind of ageist comment, and I don't know if there's it's not Islamophobic, it could be slightly anti-Semitic, not really, but you can let me know what you think after you watch that here.
About the Republicans, one more thing. The Democrats, this is so exciting, are going to have their first debate on Tuesday night. I cannot wait to see Bernie Sanders debate Hillary Clinton. It's going to look like an elderly Jewish couple arguing in the deli. All right, we got a great show.
An elderly Jewish couple arguing in the deli, huh? Well, Bernie Sanders is Jewish. Hillary Clinton is, fairly waspy, I always thought. But so, whatever. I'm analyzing a joke. I just thought it was kind of a strange joke. I usually start the show with a joke. I thought I would end with a monologue joke, and that's the show for tonight. I hope you enjoyed the 24 clips I picked out. It was a little bit more balanced, not so heavy on the Trump and the Republicans this week again, which is a little bit of a relief for me and probably for a lot of you. And hopefully I'll have time to put together some sort of edited, produced video this week, which I didn't have time to do last week, or at least an excerpt or something. But I will definitely be back next week at somewhere around 6 p.m. Pacific time. That's Greenwich Mean Time minus 7 hours. If you want to help support me with some of the problems I've had with advertising, some which I haven't had a chance to share with you, you can become one of my patrons or give me direct donations. I have a link down to my Patreon account down in the video description, or there should be like a little eye here. If you click your mouse there and you live in one of the special countries, you can give a direct donation to my YouTube channel through YouTube fan fundraising. I appreciate all the people who do that. I appreciate all of you who just watch or comment or share my videos. It all helps me keep this going and makes it worthwhile for me to spend the 8 to 10 hours picking out the clips and the 1 to 2 hours broadcasting the clips. And I appreciate all of you who join me live and keep me company. I've been reading your comments along the way. I hope to see you all next week. And I hope you enjoyed the clips I picked out. It had you left you a little bit more informed about what the corporate media thinks is important here in the United States. I think I left out a little bit about the terrorist attack in Turkey and what that meant about Syria and Russia. There was a little bit of coverage of that. Maybe more next week. Hopefully not. But given the way the situation's going, probably will be worse, not better. And I guess we'll find out next week. And until then, I guess I'll see all of you around the internet.